Hunters, welcome back to another Flushing and Dustin podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Hunt Ready. It's always good to have a good vest on in the field, especially when you're walking those long miles. So go check out Hunt Ready American-made vest. Tonight we have on a guest. His name is Brad Trumbo. Did I say the last name right? Awesome. He's an upland hunter. He's an author, biologist. So he runs Llewellin Setters. Before we got to talking, he said he's got 4 of them, so he's definitely enjoys those dogs. So we're excited to bring him on, learn more about him, learn more about the setters, and learn more about some of his work. So Brad, if you'd like to introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, howdy, Tyler. Thanks for having me on tonight. Brad Trumbo. I'm down on the southeast corner of Washington State. And as Tyler mentioned, I'm an upland bird hunter and a biologist and an author. And it's because I'm a simple kind of guy. My mind just is stuck in the outdoors and bird hunting and fly fishing in particular, and try to make a living out of that.
Yeah, can't beat that. What has fly fishing been going good recently with spring and summer coming?
Yeah, I don't get out as much as I would like to in the spring. For a couple of reasons, partially because I've got a homestead and I'm working on, habitat projects, and of course everything else that pops up when it's like, oh, I need to use my tractor. Well, the battery's dead. So then you got, just all the general stuff. I like stream fishing, and there really isn't much opportunity here where I'm at in Washington. But if I go up central Washington, there's a ton of good lake fishing. And so I went up in March and met a buddy up there, and it was phenomenal. And so, yeah, it's been good.
Yeah. Yeah. You do what type? Are they just rainbow trout up there or brown trout?
Yeah, those are desert rainbows mostly that I fish for in the spring.
Nice. That'd be fun. There's some in Iowa here. There's a northeast corner. There's some good springs that have some decent trout fishing. I've never really fished myself, just some buddies I know that have had some success up there. And a guy that in my hometown, he actually has a spring fed pond.
Nice.
And he raises trout in it. So he has some nice big ones, and every so often and he'll let us go pull a couple of them out of there and put them on the smoker. And oh man, they're super good.
Yeah, tough to beat.
Yeah. So, well, what got you into upland hunting?
So where I'm from, Appalachia, and where I grew up, there's not a whole lot for upland bird hunting. I've seen so few ruffed grouse in my youth. I probably could have counted them all on a couple of hands. I don't remember ever seeing a single woodcock, a single pheasant that escaped a farm somewhere. So I moved out to Washington. How old was I? I was about 30 when I came out here to take a job, and accidentally ended up getting my first rooster pheasant that fall. And kind of the rest is history. When I realized I was living in an area that actually had a variety of upland bird species, my wife, back then, she was just fiance, and she was like, I think you need a bird dog. And I'm like, who's no, I can't afford a dog. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Well, so she did a deep dive into critters, and just came up with personality and temperament traits from the Llewellin Setter. And plus, setters are really pretty with the long hair and the ticking and whatnot. And so she just like, we're getting to the Llewellin Setter. And I'm like, well, who might argue, So
yeah,
we ended up with a little orange belton pup who was absolutely horrible for a while, as just crazy personality. But that dog really got the wheels turning for me, when we had our first real wild bird hunt and shot a rooster. And I just haven't looked back, and we've ended up just adding dogs and adding more days of field, and the rest is history.
Yeah, that's awesome. What how old is your oldest Llewellin Setter then?
So the oldest one I have is a rescue, and she's 11. And then the next oldest is 10, and then 7 and 4.
Yeah. So what was it like? Did you your first ones? Have you trained all the dogs yourself, or did you take them somewhere?
Loosely, I would say I trained these dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a great dog trainer, and when we got the first dog, I didn't know the first thing about it. So basic obedience, get the dog out and just run them. And that's largely how I've done it with all of them. I've now have homing pigeons that I plan to start doing things a little more appropriately. but yeah, letting the dogs learn on their own as well as me learn with them has been kind of our mode of action.
Yeah, for sure. Do you mainly hunt out in Washington State then?
I do. It's just by default, it's easier to hunt where you're located. And
Yeah.
how many species I can hunt? A couple different species of grouse, pheasant, chucker, partridge, Hungarian partridge, valley quail, all that pretty local here.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah, so we can be on 4 or 5 species a day if we really wanted to. So it's
That's
it's
great.
it's tough to beat.
Yeah.
But we do like to branch out and get into some other stuff, see some new country, and try new birds.
Man, and here in Iowa, we got pheasant, and if we're lucky, we have quail,
Mhm.
for upland birds. Is there a lot of public ground out in Washington State?
It depends on where you're at. We've got a lot more BLM up in the kind of the central and northern areas, and then of course the western side of the state where the Cascade Range has more national forest. And where I am at down in the southeast corner, like the very bottom end below the Snake River, there's a lot of private land. There are a few tracts of legitimate public. Most of what I hunt is public access.
Yeah, that's that the BLM stuff? Is that what's what considered public access out there? Or
It's called the Feel Free to Hunt program, or hunt by written permission or hunt by reservation. So it's private ground. Obviously, some of it's in CRP, some of it's not. So you've got access to a lot of ground that doesn't necessarily hold birds. It's in wheat farm or whatever. The fallow ground that's planted for the conservation reserve program is pretty good in a lot of places. We are definitely limited to how many areas we can go and area sizes, and so the competition can be a little tough once in a while.
yeah, for sure. When you're out on these, are these decent sized tracts of land, or are they, like in Iowa, we kind of have, you know, they're not huge by any means. So, super large running dogs, probably aren't the greatest in Iowa conditions most of the time. But
Mhm.
what's it kind of like out there?
I would say the average parcel that I run dogs on down here is somewhere around 250 acres.
Okay.
There are tracts that are far bigger, but when it comes down to actually having habitat on it, if you got a couple hundred acres of habitat, that's a pretty good spot.
Yeah. Nice. Do you run all your dogs at the same time, or you kind of have them split up one and one, or?
I can't imagine running them all together. I think I might have to try it one day.
Yeah.
But I guess over the years when you work dogs, when anybody that has dogs ends up with kind of a lineup on how they want to hunt them. And for the longest time, so when it started out, when I had the first pair, I would hunt those two together all the time.
Mhm.
And then when I got the third dog, the puppy, I ran her with my oldest dog to kind of as a, train it up. And then I ran the middle dog just by herself. And I haven't hunted anybody with the rescue, the old dog. So she's got a little bit of a wild card about her. I really want to hunt her with the middle dog because that's a mother daughter. So
Oh,
we
nice.
got this rescue because we got her, her daughter back years ago. And when the dog came up for adoption, we grabbed her. Um, she's just
That's
she's
crazy.
I don't know if it was her upbringing or just the dog's genetics. She's not as sharp on processing things,
Yeah, yeah.
so she's got a really really short fight or flight fuse, and she flees really quickly. Like in any kind of confusion, she'll take off. So I don't hunt her with other dogs just because I like to keep an eye on her. Even with a GPS collar, I just like to know that I've got full focus on that dog. And
Yeah.
but if I had to choose what I like to do the most, my my first and second dogs together are still just an unbeatable pair.
They
And
just work well together, or?
they do. And I think it's because when the older dog was 3 and the younger dog was 1, or puppy, and they hunted together as they were really coming into their prime. When my first dog turned 3 is when she really started to learn to hunt birds. And the day that, like the first hunt of that season, we got into roosters like crazy. And that specific day, you could just see the lights come on for that dog. And having the younger dog with her, when we're down in the limit of roosters, and that young dog is watching this older dog backing the dog, going in to get the bird, and she became a phenomenal pheasant dog right there. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
It's all about getting them out and getting that exposure, and
definitely is.
some have that natural ability to just put the pieces together when they see it or you expose them to it, and it doesn't take much to train them, which is
Nope.
awesome.
And those two, probably because they hunted together a lot when they were younger, you put them on the ground together, and they're not in each other's way, but they complement each other so well in the field, and they do end up paying attention to one another just enough that they kind of cross each other's paths, and when they're working in the field, and there's almost guaranteed when one goes on point, the other's going to spot it and come in and back it.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool.
That is really cool. So you're a biologist as well, is that correct?
Yep. So I didn't realize that I was ever going to be into any kind of wildlife or habitat, especially not terrestrial. Growing up, I was big into fishing, and decided that, fish, wildlife, forestry, something like that was going to be the career path. And I ended up in fisheries. So I worked and went to college, got degrees and had experience most all in fisheries. When I moved out here, though, and really the upland bird thing turned me on to habitat, which hooked me into Pheasants Forever. And then suddenly I just found my niche in, I work for the Corps of Engineers, and we've got like 50,000 acres of public land here on the Lower Snake. And so I worked my way into that realm, and started into the actual on the ground management business. And so, yeah, now I claim to be fish and wildlife biologist because I've been doing habitat for years, and with Pheasants Forever. So
Oh, sorry, I was on
there you
mute.
go. I
My
was going to
bad.
say, I think I
Yeah.
lost your audio.
No, what I was saying while I was on mute was, is there a large difference between what Pheasants Forever is doing for land management purposes compared to what the Army Corps of Engineers doing?
I would say no, because if you really get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's all native grassland, like shrub steppe habitat that both organizations are working to enhance out here. The biggest difference is the constraints of the federal entity, trying to do their job versus a nonprofit that's got the money to just go do whatever they want. So
Yeah, that's true.
yeah.
Yeah, we got a bunch of Army Corps of Engineers land right south of where I live, and it's kind of nice because the local community college has partnered up with them, and so for their, I guess it would be probably their biology program or land management type program that they have. They've partnered with them to where the community college actually, for their classes and for projects and whatnot, they use this land to enhance it. They've put in CRP areas. They've done not like full dig outs of ponds, but kind of worked on drainage areas and put in, duck nest, like wood duck nest and whatnot. And they've done, last year they started just doing, so a lot of it is old farmland that was, and I don't know when the transition occurred from, the farmer planting to, they kind of just let it overgrow a little bit, and now this year they started burning it off, and hopefully good grasses will come back through. But the last year, Kirkwood would, they would planted clover around like where the edge of the fields were up against the timber lines. So they've been doing a lot with it lately, which is pretty cool to see. That it's definitely been enhancing, and So it's kind of nice to get that partnership that they're working together,
Mhm.
to it's not relying on just one entity. You got two of them, and you got basically free labor, from college kids are bringing out the Kirkwood equipment to do all this. And so that's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, that's awesome. I actually just accepted another job with the Corps, and so right now I work in the Endangered Species Act realm, um, kind of primarily. And so the habitat functions, I almost serve like a contractor for our natural resources team. If they have the funds to get me on board to help them do stuff, then I do. I just accepted a position kind of at the program lead level for natural resources management. So I'll be picking that one up in a couple of weeks. And I'm hoping that, that job has the opportunity to leverage partnerships and whatnot. And I'm hoping to be able to open some of those doors for the same purposes on our lands out here.
Yeah, because like you said, you worked. How long did you work for with Pheasants Forever?
Oh, I've just volunteer.
Volunteered.
Yeah,
Well, at
we've
least you
got,
got connections, though.
yeah,
You know that could really help out.
yeah. And this chapter is pretty active and pretty well funded. And so the chapter has a memorandum of understanding with one of the core properties out here, and for things like habitat work and education. And we've got a pollinator plot going on there. And so there's definitely a lot of opportunity and cooperating with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. So
Yep. So
lots going on.
what do you kind of do now currently with the endangered species? What's your day job?
So what that looks like is a federal regulation, a federal agency that takes a quote unquote action has got to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act. And so under that act is things like the Endangered Species Act and Fish and Wildlife Coordination Act, Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act, et cetera. And so my job is right now is a team leader for the biologists who help the Corps of Engineers comply with those fish and wildlife laws.
Okay.
So a lot of what I do is consult with Fish and Wildlife Service and National Marine Fishery Service on threatened and endangered species.
Is so you are you talking like when the eagles were on the endangered species and you work on with that, or is it different?
Yeah, so now that eagles are a little bit different, so let's talk about fish, because we got all the salmon and steelhead out here have some
Yeah.
type of Endangered Species Act listing. So if the Corps of Engineers needs to go out and do some maintenance at a dam or something, then whatever that looks like, I've got to consult on the action with those other agencies to make sure that we've done our diligence and have um, minimized any potential impact.
Okay.
That's really the purpose of ESA consultation.
Nice. So you kind of got to go know the ins and outs of those acts then to make sure that you're complying with them. And
Yep, we know the laws, and we know how to coordinate with the other agencies on them. What the processes are, what the timelines and other requirements are, and so yeah, you
okay.
got to know them. And that's one of the things like I've found was when I started that job, we didn't learn any of it in college. I never one in college that talked about all these different environmental laws, but including some bigger stuff like RCRA and CERCLA and the pollution type things. Didn't have a clue that Endangered Species Act was this big of a deal, and and some of these other like Fish and Wildlife Coordination Act, and then come to work for a federal agency and realize what this actually means and how it affects how work actually gets done on the ground. It's interesting.
Yeah, that is crazy. That would be a pretty interesting job, I would say. Probably
It's
keeps you.
always it's always interesting. It's never boring, and it's often
Yeah.
frustrating.
I imagine it's probably hard working with, multiple entities under to get one thing kind of accomplished, and that's
Yep,
never
it is.
easy. So, no, that's awesome. And not only are you a biologist, but you're also a published author. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So, uh, you wrote. What's the name of the book that you wrote?
So I wrote a book recently. It just published end of January this year. It's called Wingshooting the Palouse, and it was obviously inspired by bird hunting here in Washington, and it spans further than that. So I've hunted all the way out to North Dakota and back, and so I include some stories like that. But really, it's just an essay, a book of essays on the various types of bird hunting, species that I've pursued, and just working with the dogs and being on the landscape, and really a bigger picture of kind of an emotional connectedness to all of it, ecosystem and just the beauty of it all. And so it's not a how-to, it's not all about killing limits of birds. It's really just about what are the unique experiences, and how do they strike you when you're out there. And because it's hard to it's hard to find an experience from my perspective that's more like heartfelt and hits you in the soul than when you're running the dog that's your best furry friend, and you're just out having a ball, got the wind in the hair, and then the dog's sometimes the dog's not finding birds, but when the dog's finding birds, and you get this beautiful like sunrise or sunset scene, and you put up these gorgeous freaking birds, there's just beautiful upland birds, and just when everything works textbook, it's like, wow, I can't believe this is actually something I get to do.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot to that inspired, the writing. And I published professionally my first piece in 2017, and it was a story about my middle dog who's got she was born with really severe hip dysplasia, and we
Okay.
knew it at 7 months, and got her an x-ray. And on the x-ray you could see the dog's pelvis really did not form a hip socket.
Oh, wow.
So my wife and I decided that we would hunt the dog and just pay attention to her. When she got to the point where she needed the surgery, we would do it. And so at 3 years old, she had 3 or 4, she had the first one done. And so it was the femoral head ostectomy, where if the ball of the femur that fits into the socket in the pelvis, they went in and cut the ball off, because they get really gnarly, and bone spurs, and they
Okay.
really just rub on the pelvis. And
Yep.
so did the first one. um, I think 2 years later we had to do the second one, so the dog doesn't have any hips. And
Oh, wow.
she actually does really well. Apparently, smaller dogs do well. She's only about 35 pounds. So anyway, the situation with that dog, knowing how much pain she was in, it was even, not even a year old. And then we had some real issues with the breeder, regarding what their guarantee was on genetic issues. And
Yep.
um, that was a pretty rough thing that we went through. And then the fact that, I've never seen the tenacity in a dog like this one has.
Yep.
And so I wrote a story about her first pheasant.
Let's hear
And
it.
so this is the bird that was her first actual bird. She'd been probably her 1 year season, so her second season, and it was late season. And we were coming home from a site that I usually run the dogs on. I call it the training grounds, because it's a close and it's a beautiful piece, and it's full of birds. And it was late enough in the year and snowing and really nasty, and so that we weren't finding birds. And I figured because folks had over time had pushed them off. So we're driving home, and I just look out across this little hummock in the wheat field, and there's a really nasty brushy ditch that's reed canary grass and woods rose, and I see like 25 pheasant feeding along the edge of that wheat field. And I was like, holy smokes. I literally whipped the truck off the side of the road and skidded it up to a halt. And I pulled out a map, because they're out here, there are a bunch of wind turbine areas, and all of it's kind of combined into areas that have public access. And so I was like, is this one of the spots? So I pulled out my wind farm map, and I'm looking through there, and I was like, yeah, I think this is right. And I don't know if it was actually right or not. I'm
Eh,
pretty sure it was. So
For this case, it was. Yep.
it was, man. So I rolled out, and I chucked that dog out the door, and the pheasant were on to us already, because they had heard the truck and stuff.
Yeah.
And they were moving around this hummock and went into this thick stuff, and were working their way up the ditch, just kind of running away from us. And it looked like a super highway in the snow, and the dog got on that stuff. she just started trailing those birds. and I could see a bunch of them about 100 yards starting to get up and fly onto the property I knew didn't have access. And I was like,
Yeah.
well, whatever. Well, and at some point she kind of disappeared down into this bottom of the swale, and I was expecting her to pop back up, and she just never did. And I had my other dog out too, my older dog, and she covered a great big swath up around this swale, and came back down and kind of went on point. And she had never had an opportunity to back a dog before,
Yeah.
right? Because I was like, something's going on in here. Because number one, the pup's not coming when I'm calling her. She's not showing up anywhere.
Yep.
So I walk over and I peek down into the swale, and that dog is locked up hard. And it's just like, holy crap! It's one of those moments where you don't question it. It's like, all right, I'm
Yep.
going in. And so I went down in there and I kicked around and I kicked around. And finally, it was like this rooster was buried under the thick frozen hunk of reed canary grass, and finally kicked that bird up and downed it. And that dog was just could not have been more proud.
That's awesome.
She had such an awesome moment there. And so I wrote that one up and weaved it into the issues that we had had with the breeder and hip dysplasia. And
Yeah.
it wasn't like a slanderous type thing. It was just basically weaving in that, yeah, and she was born with, severely handicapped basically. And all I really did was throw in the breeder's name, because
Yeah.
I wanted it to be clear that this dog came from this breeder, and I didn't have to say anything else.
Yep. For
And
sure.
Pointing Dog Journal took it and published it right away. And so that was really awesome, kind of an eye opener for me. And I know dabbled in writing for a long time, just for giggles, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but people actually found me on Facebook after reading that article and reached out to my wife and I. They would hit us up on Facebook. They wanted to call us. They wanted to talk to us about the dog and about the breeder. And so when I realized, how much I actually enjoyed writing that,
Yeah.
and that type of, you know, information put out there, people actually get something out of it and want to know more and want to ask questions about it. And I was like, there's actually some, you know, beneficial impact here that
Yeah.
can be had on the hunting community. So as I learned and started to write more, then I started trying to, getting into some magazines, and I still publish in magazines here and there, just not as much since I've ended up with newspaper columns. And that's just kind of, it's just all kind of snowballed. And now I'm to the point where it's like, I better not take on any more work, because if I've got a day job too,
Yeah.
I won't be able to get it all done.
Not retired yet, right?
Right.
That's
And
awesome.
ultimately that was the plan. It's like, this is a lot of fun. And if I can, if I look at the 20-year plan, I can
Yeah.
build this up to have something where I don't need to cut into my retirement after I retire from the federal government.
Yeah, for
So
sure. And they already have good retirement, which is a
yeah,
positive thing.
exactly.
Did you so how so the dog has no hips now.
Mhm.
Um how was the recovery for that? And she said she's how old is she now? 4 or 5?
She's 7 now.
7 now.
Yep. And
Have
so go ahead.
have you noticed since after that surgery, like the how long it took to recover, and then like what you do? Is there certain things you do to try to help with her longevity of being able to be a field?
Yeah, so those are really good questions. And we weren't certain what was going to happen after with the first surgery, because number one, this dog she's a very, as much passion and drive as she shows and pain as she'll just push through when she's hunting birds. She is a softie at home. And so it's like, oh my gosh, we're never going to get this dog over the recovery period, because what the vet taught us is, okay, when we do this, you have to have that dog walking instantly. There cannot be any, she can't get soft, she can't be delayed. She's got to build basically a scar tissue false joint, and where that femur was
Yeah.
cut. And so he's like, if you can't get her on her feet, you've got to physically do the physical therapy for her. And he showed us how to move the dog's legs and how to exercise her. And he's like, you got to do it at least 4 times a day. And it was really hard with that pup, knowing that she was in agony because I had to exercise her leg. But it was, at the same time, it was like, I'm going to listen to what the doc says, because I want this
Yeah.
dog to do what she loves to do.
Yep.
And so I probably a week or two that I had to push her through that every day, But when I finally got her up and got her walking on it, the healing went pretty quick. And it made her a new pup for a couple of years until the other hip got so bad.
Yeah.
After the second surgery, though, she knew what was going on, and that dog walked out of the vet and like
Really?
never missed a beat. She was a little tender on that leg, but she did not stop. Like she walked on it every single day. I didn't have to do any physical therapy with her.
Nice.
She didn't make any. She wasn't, never cried about anything. Um, yeah. And the only thing I could really think is that hip hurt her so bad that having the
Ooh.
surgery was a relief.
Yeah. 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 That'd be hard to see. Have you, now that she's 7 years old, is she still moving pretty good? And
Yeah, she's doing well. It was the 20, let's see, last year was 2021, 2020 season. It was August when her hip had actually just popped out of joint. And it
okay.
was like, okay, we got to get this one done. And I hated to think that, we're going to do it in August, but the good news is the pheasant season doesn't open in Washington until late October.
Okay.
So she missed all of the early grouse and early quail, but I had her out there on the pheasant opener, and that dog took advantage of every second of it. Like she
Nice.
was a whole new dog. And I wrote a piece for Harvesting Nature and a version of it in this book called A Pointing Dog Reborn. And it was all about after that second surgery, she was just, I've never seen her
Yeah.
that tenacious and that driven and just sticking points left and right, never missing a beat. I saw that dog do some stuff last that 2020 season that it's just I still can't believe how she hunted.
Yeah.
She just she loves pheasant more than anything else, and man, when she hits the ground, she will find them.
That's awesome. I think there's something special about being able to write about your experiences and whatnot. I've kicked around the idea of not just doing the podcast, but also, maybe starting up a blog or something like that about the hunts. Cause I mean, the podcast, we get to talk about them in brief and, it's, but when you're able to put words, on a piece of paper and bring out the description and, I think it's awesome when, and, maybe I won't have the skill, but when, a writer has that skill to be able to piece words together where you as a reader can just envision what's going on, or you can envision just what it looks like in the field. And I think it's cool to be able to read. I think that's an art that's kind of disappearing, but maybe coming back a little bit in the upland community. There's some younger writers or younger guys that are starting to write, that are getting some good articles out there. And I think that's awesome. And to be able to keep the magazines alive, and
Yeah.
it's something that I think is very cool. And reading's always better than just looking at your computer screen all day.
Yes, it
anyways.
is.
So
Yeah, and we're kind of in a time right now with all of the different media outlets that we're I'm trying to think of how I want to put this. Basically, we're just at a wealth of
oh yeah.
possibilities, for people to get content out there. And a lot of it's great, some of it's not so great, but a lot of
Yep.
it really is. And there's just a lot of opportunity. And
Yes.
so one of the things that I appreciate about being an author and reading other people's work is that everybody's got a little bit of a different perspective or different delivery
Yep.
on everything. You can take, if you had 5 guys that went through a pheasant hunt, every one of them would give you a different version of it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's just one of the things that I really appreciate about it. And what I try to do in my writing is engage the reader in the actual hunt itself, because like I mentioned earlier, just all of the colors and the scenery and how the dog works and the birds, like the whole orchestration of the thing just really drives me. And when you share the detail that really puts the picture into somebody else's mind instantly, it makes it a much more interesting read for them.
Yeah, for sure. And probably one of the tougher parts of being a writer, I don't have any experience, but what I would imagine is for you to be able to explain it in a way that not only you can envision because you were there, but to put it into words that other people can now envision the same experience that you had. And man, you get that on paper and you're going to have people locked in right away.
Yeah. And well, so because my voice reads the same just about all the time, I have kind of the same mental approach to everything. One of the things I need to be careful about is not basically sounding the same thing with every single hunt.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yep, that's awesome. Where can you find your the wing shooting one at?
So Wingshooting the Palouse is available at Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Oh, it's in paper copy.
Yeah, it's
Nice.
it's a print on demand thing, so you can find it at Barnes and Noble too, and Kyoki Books. And so that's the group in Sandpoint, Idaho that I worked with on publishing.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
What's one of your favorite? You don't have to give the best story, but one of your favorite stories out of the book, if you don't mind sharing.
And I don't know if I could actually pick a favorite or a best.
They're all good.
They're all good, and obviously some are going to be better than others.
Yeah.
I think that one of the stories that I like the best has to do with, I think I call it the Fountain of Youth. And it is about me and my hipless dog in an afternoon where I was sitting here during COVID and telework, getting about tired of being a bureaucrat on another, WebEx meeting. And I had started work early that morning, and I'd never had the opportunity to hunt evenings during work, because when I actually work in the office place, my commute time keeps me from having any time to actually make it out to a hunt because the sun will set before then. So it was like 2:30 in the afternoon on an incredible late October evening or early November evening. And I was like, you know what? It's time for me to quit, and I'm really not interested in this conference call. So I just did like, see ya, shut the laptop, grabbed the shotgun, threw the dog in the truck, and went out to one of my favorite spots. And we had this just phenomenal evening. And the sunset was perfect, like the atmosphere was perfect, all of the colors were super brilliant, and in the golden hour, the dog made just a hell of a find not long out of the truck. And it was just, the whole point of the thing is the two of us went out there and totally left reality behind. We had a great hunt, we put up some birds, we got a great rooster in the bag, and we enjoyed each other as just being together. And your dog enjoys hunting with you when they check in like they're supposed to, and they're just, it's a real team thing. As the sun's going down, you kind of have a sit down with the dog and you check out the bird you got, and you totally forget of all the aches and pains and stresses and whatever else, and it's like you're young and happy and no responsibilities once again, just for a moment.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite parts that I think draws me to not only just hunting, but hunting with the dogs and being able to, it's like every time you're out there, you're worryless, you're just enjoying that moment. You can disconnect, you're not worried about your phone going off or, anything of that nature, and just out there watching them do what you want them to do. And man, when they have the success and you have the success of bagging the bird that, they found, and can share that moment, it's pretty special, and it can get you hooked pretty quickly.
It really is. And that hunt in particular, it was so cool because she had pointed this bird. Like, have you ever seen Great Basin wild rye?
I have not.
It is a bunch grass that grows like 6+ feet high and makes these bunches that are as big around as big tree trunks.
Oh, wow.
And it's just, and so you get a few of those clustered up, and it's like a little mini ecosystem in there. And so the dog disappeared behind, there was only like 3 or 4 bunches, but she disappeared, and I walked past it and there was no dog. And I was like, uh-oh, peeked around the one, and I saw that dog on dead point. Well, the rooster, I nearly stepped on it. It was like right next to my right foot. And so when I went to take another step, that bird blew up and, almost boxed my nose. And I was like, holy, and got one of those grouse reactions and swung the gun over and dropped it really quick. And I was
Yeah.
like, whoa, probably should have let it get out there a little further.
Might not be the best eating bird.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, those seem to happen sometimes. Yeah, when they get up like that right in front of you, it's no natural reaction to raise up and protect yourself.
Yeah, it's basically what it was, self-defense.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you've how young is your youngest setter?
She's 4.
4.
And yeah, and I give that little dog a lot of grief because she's from a different bloodline. We liked the traits of our first dog so much that when we got the second dog, the hipless dog, we looked into the pedigree to where they had similar blood. And the breeder we got the second dog from got a lot of their bloodline from the breeder that we bought our first dog from.
Okay.
And so the reason we didn't go back to the first breeder was because they closed their doors. They got too old and retired.
Yeah.
So anyhow, we looked into the genetics there, and then for some reason we got suckered into this pup who's now a 4-year-old pup, and her genes aren't quite the same. She's got some stuff in there. We looked at the pedigree and thought, yeah, she's actually probably going to be an okay dog, but she was a cheaper dog, and like by about $600. And so I think ultimately we got suckered in by the sale price, and
Yeah.
she's I've been thinking she's a subpar hunter for a long time, but honestly, I think the dog is just a different dog, and her hunting style reminds me more of a field trial type dog that runs really, really big.
Hmm.
So my other dogs would range out they would maybe push to 500 yards if I would have let them. Now that they're older, a couple hundred yards, they're happy with it. They
Yeah.
work a lot closer. This young dog, she'll go. I haven't seen her decide to turn back yet. I usually remind her that she's hunting with me and she needs to stop and come back.
Yeah.
So I feel like our styles are just different because I've seen her pull some miraculous points, but if the bird leaves, she leaves too. And
Yeah.
we're just now getting to the point where she isn't flushing the birds. So that dog is the reason I got electronic collars, and now the reason I've got pigeons.
Yeah.
So,
Man,
you want
those GPS collars are saviors for big running dogs.
They are.
And just being able to tell them where they're at and what the heck's even going on. They're out that far and whatnot.
Well, something interesting. I couldn't have afforded any of those electronics when I first got my first and second dogs.
Yeah.
And so it was just I worked on the dogs around the house. I guess when I got them, I was living out in a trailer in the middle of wheat fields, not too different from where my home is now. But it was like I would come home from work and kick the dog out in the yard and we would all play and everything was great, and I didn't have to worry about having them on the leash. And so they learned really early just to hang around and got that basic obedience. And so when we would go run on the grassland, I never really worried about losing the dog. It did get a little bit nerve-wracking when they're small dogs and they can disappear in the grass after about 30 or 40 yards.
Yeah.
And so when the dog is really out there and you don't know how far the dog is and it goes on point and you have no idea where it is, but you're certain that it's on a bird because you haven't seen or heard from it for a while,
Yep.
then it's like, well, okay, where's the last place that I saw it? And you go over that direction, but the dog could be totally somewhere else, right? So
Yeah.
at least they came to whistle commands. So that worked. I could communicate whistle and hand signal, but I didn't realize like how much success we were losing because I had to know where the dog was half the time.
Yeah.
So
that would be tough.
Yeah.
What did you? I mean, you just basically just keep walking until you find it.
Yeah, and my strategy was when those dogs were younger and bigger, running was probably a better strategy for my own physical health. Was I just tried as best I could to keep up and not be running, but just keep on, and keep them in sight as much as I could.
Yeah. So you have your youngest one's 4. When do you think you'll be? Are you ever going to add another one, or
Yeah, but I think I'm going to wait until the 4-year-old is the only one left.
Yeah, that's not a
Yep.
bad. We
Yep.
have.
Because
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I have two now, two dogs, and a lot of people ask when I'm gonna add the third, and it's a tough. That's just gonna be super tough because they've hunted like these two have hunted together their whole life, and he just add a third one in there, and I don't know if I'm mentally ready for it, and I feel they have, you know, they're 5 and 4 right now, so they have another good 5-6 years potentially, of
Yeah.
good hunting years, and it's like I don't really want to throw a third one in there and take away from what they have, but then I also don't want to wait too long, in case God forbid something crazy happens, and yeah, it's tough. It's tough to know when it's time to get another
Yeah.
one.
It is. I guess my only advice to you is if you're happy with how they hunt together and like they do that well together and you enjoy that time with them, just keep it that way for a while.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's probably the best thing because, like I said, they're attached at the hips. They're brother and sister from a different, you know, obviously breed, but or a different litter. But
Mhm.
yeah, they they do well together. I take them. Last year was our first year waterfowl hunting, so they do well together in the blinds. And my one, the youngest, she's a hog on the retrieves. Um, she just goes in and gets it right away. Where my other one, he sometimes he'll pick it up like immediately and come back. Sometimes he'll just stand over top of it for a second. And
Mhm.
by the time he stands over top of it and looks at it for a second, the other one's coming in and stealing it from him. But yeah, no, that's I always just people ask me and I'm like, God, I don't know, and I look at, you know, when I got him and when we started, I wasn't, super worried about having 100% field or hunting bloodlines, and I look back on their pedigree and they do have some of it in there, but they're not, it's not 100% a field bred golden per se, but I mean, they do what they're supposed to do. They listen and, but I always have that itch of, I want to see what a true field bred golden can do. And,
Mhm.
it's like, but I got to wait. I don't want to, just push these two aside just to
Yeah.
throw a third one in there. Cause that's what I feel like a third one would do is, you get that one. It's kind of like, well, these two kind of, you know, go to the wayside a little bit and I'm not ready to do that.
Yeah. It definitely throws a wrench in things for a little while.
Yeah. And it's like I live in town, so having a third dog would be, be a lot of work.
Yeah.
So
The
no, that's
Goldens are great. There's a guy in the pheasant chapter here who's been running Goldens for a long time, and they're just solid pheasant dogs for him.
yeah,
And I really enjoy the stories he's got about, you get a pellet and a bird, and somehow the dog seems to know it. And he's like, when those dogs see that a bird's been hit, they don't leave it.
yeah,
He's like, they will trail that sucker. He's like, yep, you'll see him disappear way over the hills, and he's like, you just wait. Like
yep,
10, maybe even 15 minutes later, they will come back with that bird.
yeah, yeah. We rarely lose. I can't say we never have because we have, but we rarely lose, any down birds. Um, and it's, they do have really good noses and tracking ability and whatnot. And it's cool to watch them work. I like watching, we're lucky enough. I'm going to get to hunt with a guy that we've mentioned in a few podcasts that he has a red Irish setter. And that's going to be my first experience ever hunting over a setter this coming year. So I'm pretty pumped for that just to, see how they work in the field. And I'm just used to flushing dogs. So
Yeah.
it'll be cool to see that.
Well, I hope you guys do an episode after that hunt, because I've never hunted with a red setter either. None of the
Yeah.
Irish. I hunt with folks I know that have Gordons, and I've been really impressed with them too. But the Irish setter, it's like they fell to the wayside as a bird dog probably because of pet trade type breedings for a while. But if there's a good bloodline, I'm certain they're just great dogs, because they're just as rambunctious and tenacious
Yeah.
as the other big running setters.
Yeah, we'll for sure do it. I think we might actually, it'll depend on how the hunt goes. So he'll be out in Wyoming, but I might actually take out the podcast equipment and try to do a podcast, record a podcast when we're out there. And a lot of it will depend on, I don't know if we'll have any signal or,
Yeah.
you know, I guess we're camping, so I don't know if I have enough battery power to, be able to record a full one or something. But
Yeah.
yeah, we'll for sure do one after it and talk about the experience of it and whatnot. So that'll be hopefully, I don't know if I'll have my GoPro and stuff. So hopefully the dog will be, close to be able to get a couple good
Mhm.
snaps of them on point and birds flushing and stuff. So I think it'll be pretty neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that's a good experience for you.
Yeah. No, we're definitely looking forward to it. We're, I've never expanded much outside of Iowa. But we were lucky enough to meet a couple guys that have, that we've become friends with. They, met them kind of through the podcast a little bit, and they invited us to go out to Wyoming with them. There's sage grouse hunting.
Nice.
So we're gonna take them up on that opportunity, and yeah, so that'll be new bird, new dogs. Totally new experience and camping nonetheless. So getting the full on experience going out there.
That's excellent.
Yeah, which would be very cool. So
If you guys end up doing a road trip out all the way out to the Washington area, let me know, and I'll be more than happy to show you around. We've
yeah,
the Palouse down, at least down my way, has had a phenomenal Hungarian partridge years the last 3 years.
nice.
So yeah, it's just been. I took a guy out last year who's never hunted with a pointing dog, and
Yeah.
took him into a couple of the partridge covers that I know, and we got him 4 coveys that morning, and he got his first hunt, and got to see a pointing dog actually work. And it was just, man, that was an awesome day.
Yeah. What part of Washington you live in? I'm just
So this
seeing.
is south of the Snake River. So you'll see down in that southeast corner, it comes out of Lewiston, Idaho, and flows down toward Umatilla, Oregon. And so it's just this little teeny bottom corner of the state.
Just seeing how far of a it's a
Mhm.
haul out there.
It's a haul. Like I
One
said,
way,
if you ever find yourself out this way,
yeah. One way is from my hometown to, this is just like the middle of Washington, so I don't know if it's correct where it's at, but 1,765 miles.
Mhm.
And that would be, let's see, that's going to right next to Chumstick and Leavenworth.
Oh yeah, it would be a little shorter than that, because if you were
Okay.
coming, let's say you're coming out 90, you would head south around Spokane.
Okay. Nice. Be a fun trip. I
Yeah.
would probably have to bring my soon to be wife on that one,
Mhm.
just to be like, hey, you want to ride with me for 24 hours? I don't know if she would actually enjoy that or.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Leavenworth. That's a really neat Bavarian town.
Is it?
Yeah.
Nice.
I just think that Central Washington, there's lots of Washington I think is really cool. Central
Yeah.
Washington, though, the Scablands out there is a really neat spot, and has phenomenal quail and pheasant hunting when you can find the good state grounds and whatnot that are in habitat still.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's actually a pretty place. Spokane's not a bad place either.
Does it rain out there a lot?
Not here, not on the east side. So the
Okay.
Cascade Range is a really big, causes a really big rain shadow. It's wet all the way on the coastal range, and then by the time, it's funny, if you're in a town called Wenatchee, you can stand there and look out on the ridges toward the west, and you can see the evergreens peter out. And so
really?
by the time the precip crosses the Columbia River right there at Wenatchee, it's sagebrush from there all the way over.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Dang. Yeah, you can kind of see on the map how it's green.
Yep.
Just nice and green, and then it's brown.
That's right. By June, all of the cheatgrass in the hills and whatnot is already brown.
That's awesome. That's crazy. I never, like I said, I never knew Washington. A lot of people talk about Montana and whatnot having a good amount of different species of upland birds. I didn't know that Washington was that plentiful of different species to chase.
Yeah. We've got a lot of different species, which is great. It's, the abundance is not what you find in some of the other Western states. So
Yeah.
Washington's not like a major destination.
Yeah.
But I guess it depends on what your expectations are, because, I'd never tire of hunting this area.
Yep. I think it's cool. I won't really do it. I mean, I'm gonna kind of start it with these dogs, but um, especially my next one, I would like to just see how many different species I can get
Mhm.
with that dog, and to do that, I'm gonna have to travel obviously 1,758 miles west, and so, but it's worth it, to get those memories and whatnot.
Yeah.
What's out of the upland birds that you've hunted, what's your favorite one to
Oh man, another nearly impossible question.
all of them?
Oh my gosh. I think some of the best hunts that I've had have been on the covey birds, like quail and partridge. Chukar are just so hard because of their terrain and their just the way they are.
Yeah,
But man, if you can get on really good Hungarian partridge or really good valley quail coveys, the way those birds hold and the way they flush, and it's just phenomenal.
yeah,
Oh man. And so I'm really blessed to have a huge quail covey here on my little homestead. And so I do some of the property work to make sure that they're fat and happy.
yeah,
And a couple times a year, me and the dogs run out for, it doesn't take us long. I've only got 6.5 acres, and we just go out, and it's like the dog knows the brush piles, runs up, points the brush pile, and you go in and it's like, okay, so maybe 50% of the covey is going to get up first. So you let that first flush go and you just
yeah,
hang out for a minute. And then the next flush comes up, and so just knowing the birds and where they are and how they are, and man, the covey birds are so much fun.
yeah. It is kind of cool. It's like a popcorn kind of, you get
Hmm.
4 or 5, and then another one. Yeah, yeah. I'd like it, in Iowa. I wish we had a better quail population, but you got to go pretty far south and I'm sure there's pockets throughout the state that you can find some decent populations. But um, yeah, quail. So we raise quail every year, and I use them mainly for training the dogs and whatnot. And then my dad has some ground outside of our hometown, and so we release them out there and use them to let the dogs work them and whatnot. But just listening to them get up and just
Hmm.
their fast wing beat and stuff, it's super cool.
Yeah, they are awesome.
But
I've been wanting to hunt bobs for a long time, so I bet that's pretty sweet.
yeah, yeah, and I don't. I'm assuming the other type of quail are pretty similar when they get up, like sound wise, and uh, as fast as they're flying. I guess that's another fun part, is just how small and fast they are.
Yeah.
Just get up and get out.
One of the things I found over the years is I really don't mind missing birds, because I always learn something from it, but
Yeah,
I kind of like being baffled in how it actually happens sometimes.
yeah,
I mentioned earlier, I get the snap shooting, like the instinctual pull up and shoot kind of thing happens to me quite often if I get flustered. And just you'll see the wad blow right past a bird like that. And it's like, if I'd have just
yeah,
waited for it to get further out there, something
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
I really enjoy screwing up.
Hey, it's the best way to learn.
It's true.
Sometimes it's a hard way to learn, but it's usually a good way to learn. So, well, Brad, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Everybody, make sure you go check him out. It's tailfeathers_upland on Instagram. Go check out his book. Go out and support him. So I'll definitely be picking up a copy of it. Look forward to reading it. And yeah, if we ever get out to Washington, and make that trek out there, we'll definitely keep in contact, and look forward to seeing some of your bird hunts this year, and reading some more of your articles.
Hey, sounds good, Tyler. Really appreciate the support and you having me on.
Yeah, no problem. So, well, you have a good rest of your night, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, sounds good, bud. Take care.
All right. Yep. See ya.